Hey, we're live. Look at that. We did it.
Awesome.
So, yeah, everybody, thanks for joining us at the Killer Be Killed podcast, the most unlistened podcast on the interwebs. Here with my
Woo.
buddy Josh. And maybe joined, rumor has we may be joined by George at some point, maybe not. Feel free to post your questions and comments. I see Tom has already listened to us while he's working out. Good to see you, Tommy. He's an elite member at the Self Defense Company. Awesome. So, what we were just talking about before it came on air is, we have the Bodyguard concealed armor. We do some stuff overseas, and Josh asked about, are there any restrictions? And I said, yeah, there's something called ITAR, which basically what that's there for is to make sure that at least we're not selling any state secrets. It's no technology that we don't want the bad guys to have. And it's also, is this going to a country that we are in good standing with? And what they want to do is track the the chain of custody from the point of sale all the way to the end user. They want to know what it's being used for. Again, we fill out the paperwork, they tell us where it's going. That's it. They're saying like, okay, you can sell this level armor, this type of armor to there. That's okay. To be honest, once it gets out of where we ship it to, it's beyond our control, because I can't, all I can do is if something does come up and it does wind up someplace where it's not supposed to be, then, we can say, we can't sell to you because that was a problem before. And I think usually what the ITAR registration is just to make sure that we're, selling to somebody who's at least above board at the time that we're selling it. It's like, well, he was a teacher and he passed a background check. Who knew he was a pedophile? Well, you don't know until they break the law and get caught, by the way. So,
Yeah.
So
my next question to that before we started. Yeah. So my next question before that or after that, as we decided to get started was, I don't think there's any regulations on teaching like self-defense, like martial arts stuff worldwide, but I know for firearms there is, right? They have a lot of rules about who you can and can't teach and what skills you can and can't teach them.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So, right. I mean, you could say, it's bizarre because I probably would guess that you could find all of that on YouTube someplace.
Of course.
It's funny. You're like,
it goes back to tactics, right? So like, a lot of people don't realize, but like a lot of military tactics and strategies are actually classified, right? And so like if foreign nationals come and do training with us, like there's certain portions of training that they can't participate in, yet they can go on and buy like a 1990s manual from the Ranger Handbook for free on like a free PDF. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we have that like available on our platform. And
exactly.
I mean, the reality is you don't know. The only difference between finding something on YouTube and, getting taught it, you don't know. It's like, is this legitimate? I mean, unless you had a good baseline, like self-defense, right? Unless you have a good baseline, understanding, what, primary rules are. You can look at something and be like, I don't know if this is good or this is not. And plus there's a progression to be taught stuff. You could see, one thing, but it was cool. Like I was just watching a video the other day of Keanu Reeves going through training for John Wick. Really cool shit, dude. That dude works his ass off.
He does. That guy's really, really good.
He's like, and I know he's been doing BJJ and some other shit. And he was doing like Kung Fu back in the day with the Matrix. And he's like, man, he's like, all right. He's like fucking sweating it out.
Yeah, he does like 3-gun competitions and stuff. Like he's legit.
Yeah, he's fucking good, man. So Eric checking in from Michigan. He's got a second shift, crappy hours. I feel your pain. Welcome.
Hey, at least it lets you listen, though.
Right. Hopefully you don't get a call, get banged up or something. But at least we can make an hour go by, at least a little less painful. So we had a lot of things happen this week in the news, and one of the first things we're going to talk about is
so for those that probably don't know, which is everybody, me and Damian, mostly Damian, and George sometimes, sends people, or we send each other links of stuff going on in the world all week long, and we end up with this gigantic list of stuff to try and talk about. We usually get to like 2 of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So this is like, yeah. So here we go. Here's the first one. This you sent me: arrest made after TPUSA chapter president violently assaulted by leftist wielding bike lock on Texas campus. And so what I'm gathering, this is a trans, person.
Yes.
And
Yep.
And TPUSA, that's Charlie Kirk's group. I didn't realize what that was. I had to go down. Turning Point USA. I don't know what that is. I don't get the newsletter. I know who Charlie Kirk is.
Some conservative thing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a young conservative guy. He does like a lot of campus talks. And so, I mean, so there's a couple things with this. One is that, well, first, let me just first paragraph. University of Texas campus police arrested the suspect involved on the TPUSA chapter president, Paige Newman, and vice president Grace. So these are 2 girls, I'm assuming, right? And Charlie Kirk confirmed the arrest on social media, stating that the individual had been placed in jail, according to the information in the police. So let's see the X video. We got, okay, so, all right, so this is, let me see if I can.
It's not playing for us.
Okay, can you see that? So it's in quads. So there's like,
yeah, we still can't see it
here. Oh no! Oh shit! I gotta share the screen. Share this tab instead. How's that?
There we go. Yep.
All right. So.
Oh, that's full assault.
Oh, okay.
So I think this is after the fact, right? People are like, "Oh, something's happening.
Yeah.
Let's start filming," but the incident had already occurred, right?
Right. And so, this brings. So there's a couple things. Let me just shut this off. All right. So a couple things come to mind with this, and I see Clayton's waiting to jump on. Hold on, we'll bring him in the next story. So, a couple things. One is that, you have there's definitely a different way that, let's just say, the woke radical side, and I've always been there's people doing bad things on both sides, right? This is like what you normally say because you want to be that person. And, but other than the shit that happened down in Georgia when when they were taking down all the statues and the dude drove over people in his car, which was horrible, I'm not seeing a lot of right-oriented, violent activist groups. Now, people will say that Patriot Watch and the Proud Boys were those such groups, but I think the Patriot Watch, I think these are, I'm going to tell you, man, I think these were, federally funded groups, because like none of these guys got doxxed. There was one guy who was the figurehead of it, but then the rest of them, and now where are they? They don't. I haven't heard the Proud Boys do anything, even when like the last year of when during the election year. I haven't heard anything with the Proud Boys. I haven't heard anything with Patriot Watch. Yet I see this shit, and then you've got and then what's going on with the Tesla dealerships, which we'll get to in a minute. But you're looking at this stuff and you're like, okay, who's fucking, who's
actually causing mayhem, right?
Right. And like this,
criminal mayhem.
Yeah, I believe this is a, deranged individual. This is not a normal person. And I feel bad for this person who is like dealing with this in their life, that is like trying to, figure out if they're, what gender they are. I mean, I can't imagine like to even get to that point where like, even if I'm drawing attention to myself to like do that,
it's crazy. It's so indoctrinated now. One of my friends who's an English teacher in high school, she was telling me that she has a class, at least one class, where every single student in the class is like a trans, like identifies as something random.
Oh, how does she
And she
even
was like, and
bother calling?
it's in every single class, but she said that one class is every single person. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's who the hell was it? I don't think it was Sean Ryan. It was somebody. It's like, psychology and mindset is more contagious than the flu, right? Like,
we talk about the crowd, like
yeah,
mobs, right? Like the
right.
mob mentality. Like the psychology is real.
Yeah, and it's easy to like if you have anything going on, you're automatically branded a hero and brave by people you don't know just because you do this. Right. So you're automatically like, oh my God, you're so fantastic. You're so brave. You go, girl or boy or whatever the hell you want to be. And immediately you get like pats on the back. So, and then it's a matter of how extreme can I make this? And then you got parents who are generally, I believe, trying to do the right thing for their kids because you want them to be happy and they thrust this thing. Well, if you don't, they'll kill themselves. That's basically what happens. But instead of just kind of like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but let's just, stay the course right now and let's see how you feel in a couple, in a year or two.
Yeah, I mean, it goes, my kids talk about this with me all the time because I shared this with them not that long ago. When I was in first grade, right, I was probably like 5, 6, maybe, because I started kindergarten early. And, when I was in first grade,
your parents just wanted to get rid of you. I just want to make sure, Josh, let's get Josh out of the house and make him somebody else.
People need to understand that I'm a twin, right? And so between me and my brother wreaking havoc at the house, my mom absolutely had to get rid of us.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Oh my God. My brother's 6 years older than me. And the shit we did was like, my dad was not really good at fixing sheetrock, but he got pretty good at some point.
Yeah, we, like I tell people, like I literally was born scrapping, right? I was scrapping in the womb.
Yeah.
I got born, and like I've just been scrapping ever since. Like people would come to my house. I have like vague memories when I was like 4, 5, 6 years old. People come to my house and being like, "Are they okay?" My parents just like, they do this all day long.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's funny because again, I had an older brother and his friends, and they literally beat the crap out of me. And having a son, who doesn't have an older brother. And we were talking about this the other day with him. I'm like, look, man, I had to get you tougher. And I would do stuff like we'd be playing basketball and I'd be like talking shit to him. And he's like 6. And Angela would come out on the porch. She'd be like, don't do that to him. I'm like, look, I go, there's 2 rules. I go, he can call me whatever he wants, right? He can say whatever he wants to me and he can leave. I'm not keeping him on here. So and he'd turn around and be like, Mom, get out of here. Like that shit. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, dude, and I didn't let him win. It was like, we're not doing anything. And until like he got about 7th grade, he like crossed me up and drove and I just started laughing. And he's like, what, you're not mad? I go, no, dude. I'm like, I am so bad at this sport. I'm like, if you're not doing this to me now, I would tell you to go do something else. So
but anyway, so the point was I'm in first grade, right?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty little. And I told my mom I wanted to change my name to Garfield because I loved Garfield the cat because he was just lazy and ate food all day long.
Right.
And my mom was just like, okay, you know what? Let's pocket that thought. And if you feel the same way in a couple years, we'll revisit the topic. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is the responsible parent thing to do, right?
Right.
And so then I don't bring it up for like 2, 3 years. And one day my mom's just like, hey, remember that conversation about how you wanted to change your name to Garfield? And I'm just like, yeah, I do. And she's like, do you still want to change your name? And I was like, no, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, you gotta like, I think Russell Peters, the comedian, was talking about that. His girl, like, she's like early teens. 1 week she was like, I think I'm a boy. Next week she's a lesbian. The next week she likes boy. It's like, okay. Just kind of like, don't make a big deal out of it and just be like, okay. And then just like let it, just like your mom did, and just let it go, man.
You just let it go. You just gotta let it go.
You don't need to start counseling yet. You don't need, look, once they start doing self-destructive behavior that's a whole other thing.
For sure. Like if I started in Bodyguard and I was like, Mom, I'm gonna do nothing but like lay here and eat food and you have to feed me and I'm a cat. And I did that for like weeks and months. Like now that's a problem, right?
Right. So let's add Clayton in. He's been waiting long enough. Yo, Clayton, what's up, man?
Hey, Clayton.
How's it going, fellas?
It's good. So it's funny. I mean, not like my daughter listens to this, so she won't. But like my daughter, like when she's teen, and there was an incident where a girl had called her, and my daughter was never fat. Let me just go. She'll tell you a different story, but she was never, right? So she just grew up like not skinny, if that's the best way I could describe it. She was never fat. She was just, a kid.
Like normal.
Always athletic, always doing something normal, right? Not like a rail, none of that. So, I just want to plug in real quick. So, she gets, pranked, so to speak, but, with caller ID, these kids aren't savvy when they're 12. At least back then they weren't. So we knew who it was dealt with. But immediately after that, she started like, we were on vacation, and she immediately is like, okay, I'm jogging and riding my bike every day and working out every day. That's what started it. So, I felt bad because Angela was like, all of a sudden she was her training partner, because she'd be like, Mom, let's go for a bike ride. Mom, let's go for a bike ride. So I was like, okay, go for a bike ride. So she definitely started like losing weight. She wanted to be, vegetarian, vegan, whatever. So we're like, to the point where like, okay, here's the deal. You can do this, but we're going to get blood work done every like 3 to 6 months, give or take. And you can't get below this weight. If this happens, you get below this weight and you're unhealthy, we're going to really take you to the doctor, and we're going to, do the whole thing. So as far as like, you're going to go see somebody.
You were a responsible parent?
Yes. So now we're sitting there, and as years go by, she went through high school, she was vegan. She didn't go below a certain weight. And then as soon as when she got out to college, kind of like, started growing out of it and then started eating meat again. And then it was funny because she works out all the time. Like I said, she just did the LA Marathon a week and a half ago. We were out there. So, but it's funny because she's like, oh my God, Dad, I have so much energy now and I'm so much stronger. And I said, I'm like, like, yeah, no shit. I'm like, animal protein's got a way of doing that for you. So, so flash forward, parents, and we're out there, and also she comes out of nowhere. She's like, I had an eating disorder. Like she starts like dropping it, and we're like, you were borderline. Joe was not borderline, blah blah blah, and then she starts rattling off like she's got a complete revisionist history of like what happened. And I'm like, I'll say shut up, because Angela's like bah, 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 and she's with her boyfriend, and so that all I'm like that's not the way I remember it at all. And I'm like, because my sister was bulimic. One of my like, when I say bulimic, like finding like bags of vomit in like the basement, like garbage bags. I mean, like crap. Like she would eat, like she was a ballet dancer, so that kind of explains it. I mean, she was a ballet dancer like at a professional level too. I mean, talk about like Black Swan. Like, yeah, it's real. Like, I mean, it is a rough life if that's the right life you take. Besides like work, I mean, they're training like they'll go like 8 hours a day. And then back then in the 70s and 80s and 90s, I mean, they're like, caffeine, nicotine, whatever. And then, you're fat. She had a Russian dance teacher. All she did was fucking chain smoke. Her and the lady played the piano. And you go into the dance studio, it was like a foot of smoke coming down from the ceiling. And these two ladies like chain smoking. One's yelling in like Russian and broken English at the class. The other one's just playing the piano. And it's a brutal existence. So, we had that. And then I had another one of my buddies' sisters was severely anorexic, to the point, like, even after she recovered, she wound up dying in her 20s because her organs were totaled. So I'm like, I'm like, you understand? I go, that's the perspective I know. I'm like, you weren't hospitalized. We didn't. She'd be like, I passed out in my room. I'm like, yeah, great. I did that like multiple times during a wrestling season. You know, I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I get it, but I'm like, you never were. We set thresholds for you,
Right.
and made sure your blood work was good. So at least, you know, if there was a problem, we were ahead of it. And it was funny because like later, her boyfriend came in because we were making signs for her, and we were fucking fuming. And I'm like, look, let me tell you something. And then immediately after, she like texts Angela. She's like, I'm sorry. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, shit, dude. I'm like, I thought we handled that great. I'm like, you weren't institutionalized. You had fucking great grades. You never missed school. I'm like, yeah. But again, parents, you know, you could do everything well. And
kids are always going to remember it different too. I can't tell you how many stories I have that are 100% different than my parents. Mm-hmm. And I will die with my story.
Right. Of course.
That's on the side note. I have heard the magic words from my oldest child, my daughter. She's 31 now. And I've heard the words, you did a pretty good job, Daddy. You know, I was like,
so you mean to say I got to wait 9 years?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Honestly, I was probably in my mid to late 20s when I finally looked at my dad and was like, I recognize you guys did the best you could.
I didn't do it by myself, okay? But she told me, you did pretty good, Daddy. And that's a good feeling. Man. That's something to look forward to. That's all we give a shit.
Yeah, man. That's what, like I said, like I get it from my son constantly. He's very well aware. You know, we talk all the time. And my daughter, you know, she does too. And the reason why I know that is because, you know, we're planning on moving in a few years. She's like, I want to buy the house. I want to live there. I want to do it. So if she didn't want to do that, you know, if she had an awful upbringing, she would want to stay far away from this place as possible.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so I'm like, okay, that's cool. You know, but I get it. And you know what? I said, like, we're the adults in the room. You know, it's like, I understand, you know, what you're going through. And plus, you know, taking it out of context before she's running this race, she's very nervous. But that was like, and, you know, I'm not going to say I didn't, you know, I raise a girl differently than I raise a boy. That's just how it is. I mean, and I raise each child differently than I raise them too, because as we talked about before, they're all wired different. Yeah, they're all wired different. You're like, I remember when I was like sitting on the trampoline with both of them, and God, they had to be like 4 and 8, and she's like grilling me, right, just about stuff, and she's like, "Why do you like him better than me?" And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, it's not that. I go, it's just this. I'm like, you're breaking my balls right now. And I look over in the corner. He's like trying to do a headstand. His foot's like caught in the net. And I'm like, and he's doing that. So I'm like, so like,
he ain't stressing me at all.
Right. He's like, look at it. Look at that moron. You know, I'm like, that's funny as shit. I go, I'm sitting there. I'm like getting interrogated. You know, I'm like, God damn. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. It was a aha moment, you know, where I'm like, yeah, I don't, you know, I'm just trying to, you know, I'm making this shit up as I go along too.
Yeah.
You know,
don't we all,
I don't know.
I mean, it's like, I still can't believe I'm in charge of raising people and have been in charge of raising people. And I'm like, that probably never goes away. Like, I can't believe I raised people and they went off to go live lives and they survived.
Yep. They're doing something like, you know, I'm like, yeah, it's like, you know how to do that? Like, you know, they're like, fix something.
That's about like my grandparents on my daddy's side. They raised 10 children, and none of them ended up in prison. They all made it to adulthood, and none of them ended up in prison. That's an accomplishment.
Damn. That's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good.
Because look, I got a theory.
That's impressive.
Every fourth kid, there's the asshole factor. You know, there's always one kid that didn't get fucking touched, you know, didn't get hugged enough, didn't get looked at enough. Oh, you went to my games. I mean, we had it with 3 of us. And it's like, you know, you like them better. You like, you know, there's always going to be somebody. Always going to be something.
Hey, Andrew, if you're listening, that's you.
As I said, like, if it's 3 kids, great. Like 4, we're kind of pushing it. Especially like nowadays. Back when our parents were, God, my mom's in her 80s now. Back then, it was like, okay, fuck you, go work. It's like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give, no one gives a shit. Children are better, seen and not heard, or not even seen or not even heard.
Yeah.
And then, we're the age where it's like, just get out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Get out of the house, come back when the street lights come on. Right. I mean, that's kind of that was it. You were out there, you freaking figured it out. Andrew, nicely, screw you. Thanks, man. Nicely done. So yeah, I just, and again, you're like trying to, it's now with, our kids, really trying to get them to like, look, get a place, make sure your house isn't too big, because if you get to I got kids, their house is too big, man. It's just like, you go in, it's very difficult, to kind of be like, seeing how
everybody's
other people
always
live.
just gone away from everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you gotta walk through other people to get out of the house. That's kind of it. Right. I'm like, if you could sit there and you got your, you have any kid with their own entrance to their bedroom is going to have problems. In my opinion, I don't know. I mean, we have a separate entrance to the basement and it was problems enough, at least with the boy. I mean, the boy, it's like, yeah, whatever, dude. I told him, I'm like, look, I go, if you get it pregnant, I go, I'm not taking care of it. I'm like, I understand. I'm like, this is like at a very young age. I was like, look, man, you start screwing around. I go, you start doing that stuff. I go, you're raising it. I'm like, your mom and I raised you. I go, if we fucked up and made you have a kid, I'll be the best grandfather you ever saw. But, you're going to, take an active part in, doing this. Right. Yes, and I think we were watching, because he was very much into basketball, and we were watching, what was it? Hoop Dreams. It was basically a documentary about 2 kids in the Philadelphia area. And one of the kids, like he was a junior in high school, had a kid. And my son was in middle school. He's like, does he have a kid? I go, yeah, dude, that's his kid. Like, that's what happens when you do that. He's like, oh, like, yeah, imagine that. In 2 years from now, you got a kid. Yeah. So anyway, so like we're saying before, we're looking at, how, it just seems that the woke left is, it's for the people who don't believe in firearms and the right to own. They're very quick to use violence. Like,
yeah,
when I'm looking at this stuff.
I was gonna say, on that note, let's bring up the Tesla stuff.
Yeah, so the FBI is launching this task force. I guess I don't know anything about this anarchist blog doxing site. It's fiery attacks. So far there have been 8 Tesla dealerships that have been attacked.
48 instances so far. It said 48.
Did it say 48?
What did it say? Scroll up just to like 2 lines. There.
Oh wow!
The Bureau has received reports of 48 instances.
Okay, the Tesla vehicles. So that's like, and that goes from like somebody vandalizing an individual car to
the charging stations.
Right.
So, I mean, the irony here is that the damage they're doing to the environment right now, as they're burning lithium batteries and automobiles, and all that shit is going into the air and into the earth. I'm like, I guess fuck the environment is what we're saying now.
Yeah, so it always reminds me of, I watched this senator or some congressman or whatever, he was doing like this, they do like these little like community deals or whatever, and he was like taking questions from the audience. These 2 girls got up and they were like, we want wind power only, right? And he was just like, okay, I mean, he's like, I'm okay with like some wind power, but he's like, I think we need to have like diversified forms of energy. And they're like, no, if it's not wind power, then it's, horrible. And he was like, okay, well, did you know? He's like, because, save the environment. And he was like, wind turbines like kill, like 10,000 birds a year,
right?
Like outrageous numbers, right? And they were just like, what? And he was like, yeah, he's like, they kill all these birds, plus, the crops that they destroy to put these in, et cetera, right? And then they were like, well, we don't care about the birds. And he was like, what? He's like, wait, so he's like, you care about the environment, but not the birds. He's like, I bet the Audubon Society would disagree with you.
Right. And add to that, all the ones that they put in the ocean screw up all the migration because they put out sound waves.
Right,
so
exactly.
Whales and marine life are getting affected. I mean, there's all of a sudden, like you put in like wind turbines and like all of a sudden whales beach themselves. I'm like, and then even to dismantle the amount of concrete and raw materials it takes to put them up. And then when you're disposing of them is a whole other issue.
They just get buried, and not to mention all the oils and everything that pour out of those things when they break and just soak the earth. Oh.
Yeah, they're like, you're looking at, that's the thing with, again, it's like, oh, it's what we're fixing right now. I don't want to see a smokestack. I want to see a wind turbine. Okay, great. I don't give a shit. I don't want to see smoke going in there. I don't want to see car exhaust going in the air. Yeah, but what you don't see with an electric vehicle is all the brake dust it manufactures, all the residue off of tires, the lithium batteries,
the slave labor getting the lithium.
Let's forget about the cobalt mines in the Congo, where they're using hand tools and they got child labor. Let's just ignore that shit.
Yeah.
While you post on your iPhone that has the same material in it. What about right now disposing of this shit? I mean, I think eventually they'll figure it out, a way that, to either recycle or dispose of this stuff properly. But right now it just gets buried. And now lighting them on fire. And now, again, the other question is why the FBI is getting involved, because, a lot of these things are funded by, NGOs, right? Non-government agencies, organizations that literally are funded by the federal government. So, and that's why USAID, they're starting to probe around in there, because it was a lot of like low-hanging fruit as far as, where that money's going and who's getting it. Again, people will complain, well, it's not a big part of the budget. Yeah, but it's just an example that, you can dig into right away and easily shut it down. So, you're looking at this stuff and and if I'm on the left, I mean, how many people owned Teslas 6 years ago that were woke? All of them? Right?
I mean, not even 6 years ago, like 8 months ago.
Right. And now you're, now it's like, oh, fuck the environment. I'm, pissed off that a former Democrat, one of, I don't know, let's count them: Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump. All former Democrats are now Republicans. That's not that doesn't even factor anybody's calculus. They're just like, no, fuck Tesla because of what? He switched teams.
Well, and you could say, are they really Republicans, or are they really just America First, right? Is there actually a new political party that's developed? Yeah,
I agree. I think so too. It's just in the form of Republican or Republican.
Because they already had a solid base, right? Yeah.
And it was easy, and it was easier, because what happens is, it's like the difference between, I think, Republicans and Democrat. If you were a former Republican going over a Democrat, very difficult. You'll never be fucking forgiven, right? They're going to go back and they're going to be like, Josh, I saw you waving the American flag. What the fuck? And
how do I get rid of my American flag tattoo? Oh no.
Right. Exactly. Now you have to turn it upside. You got to walk on your hands. Right. So now, it's, on the other side, we're like, yeah, sure. Come on. We don't give a shit. And don't get me wrong. I don't know what the hell's going on with Dan Crenshaw, but that dude, there's another Republican who is still embedded in, I don't know if you heard about him. He had this thing with, shit. God damn. The dude used to be on Fox News. I can't even say it. White guy.
Oh gosh, I know who you're talking about.
Oh my god, dude! Oh, and I gotta look at my. I should. Why am I not?
We start to get old and our memories go. It's fine.
Jesus Christ, Tucker Carlson. So he
Yeah.
had a thing with him, where Tucker kind of outed him, for support, his stance on the Ukraine war, which he thinks he's still supporting it, and that he made, a few $1 million in the stock market. So he went from saying he had $20 million in the stock market, and somebody pulled it up. He had like 1.3 million, and then he wound up turning around and saying, "Well, look," he said, "What? I can't, make money and support my family," kind of shit. And they're like, "Well, you shouldn't be trading in the stock market because there's a conflict of interest and you have inside information." And they showed exactly where certain votes happened and where he invested his money. I'm like, all this shit, it's out there, So then he wound up saying if he's ever saw Tucker Carlson, he would, basically kill him. I'm like, is this what we're doing now? I'm like,
threats are the norm now. If nobody's giving or getting threats, I don't know if the world would keep going.
Yeah, the perception is you're not doing nothing if you're not threatening somebody.
Right.
There's idiots on both sides, guys.
Yeah, for
sure. For sure.
I mean, it's the guys who want business as usual on both sides. So, and up until now, and I hope I'm right, up until now, it was just literally, same team, different jersey kind of shit, right? They're all like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then nothing happens. And we're still in these, forever wars and shit's still getting, crammed down our throats and like the food. And you're like, all right, guys, I said, like, we talked about this before. Like, we're trying to unravel it like a 30-year problem now.
Yeah.
I mean, holy shit. Have you seen it?
Technically, same team, different shirt has been going on since like 1900. 1900.
Well, except the one guy who we wound up clipping in 1960.
Oh, you mean that they just released all the information on?
Have you seen any of this shit?
I've seen bits and pieces. I haven't looked at Al yet.
I mean, I'm not reading 80,000 pages. I'm just getting the highlights too. But there was one guy who was in the agency. He's a big intelligence guy during World War II.
You know what's great is we don't even need our tinfoil hat for this because it all got released.
Right. And I talked about this before. If you look up tinfoil hat, the guy who actually wore the original tinfoil hat did have a chip implanted in his brain by the fucking CIA. And he was a smart like physicist. And he's like, put the tinfoil hat, at least like block the signal so they couldn't track where he was. So yeah, even the tinfoil hat guy was a real tinfoil hat guy. So this guy is like, essentially, kids, our government killed our own president, period. Flat out. There's no lone gunman bullshit. It is. They also had another guy set up in Chicago in case Kennedy showed up in Chicago. So it was a handful of guys, and they were upset because Kennedy was going to blow the whistle on
UFOs.
I don't know if it was. What's that?
It was UFOs and technology and.
No, it was something to do with how they were raising money. There was a racket going on between running guns and drugs. And Kennedy saw the CIA was doing that. He was going to blow the whistle on it. And they fucking, like, this group of guys killed him. Now,
so apparently, maybe I belong to like way more conspiracious groups or something.
Right.
But the clips I've been seeing is that they're actually showing that as he was requesting more and more data on UFOs and advanced technology, it like directly correlated to them then killing him.
Oh God, I think that was going on.
I think JFK was looking at a lot of stuff and saying, what is our government doing? And as a whole, the shadow government was like, okay, we have to stop this guy or something's going to get out. Any of these pieces, right?
Right. And then RFK's looking at the Warren Commission and they're like, okay, enough of this motherfucker. I guess these guys don't learn. And they clipped him too. I mean, so you go back to there's a document of this guy. They interviewed some witnesses from New Jersey. So this guy, World War II, vet in the OSS, then came into the CIA, came to their house, and he's at dinner. They're like, he was sober. He was very upset. He's like, these guys killed the president because of this. And then this was reported, and then literally, I think it was like 9 days later, that guy wound up dead. So, you have that. You've got, I don't know anything on MLK yet. I haven't looked at that, but Sirhan, who killed RFK, doesn't even remember, doing it. I mean, which you could say under extreme stress, you do blackout. I mean, that does happen. But, we had MK Ultra.
Yeah, but I mean, you black out maybe in the moment, not like everything leading up to it.
Right, exactly. I mean, you've got Jolly West, who is running MK Ultra, who was in Ruby's fucking cell, and then all of a sudden he dies of cancer, right? I mean, it's like, holy crap, all of a sudden a strip club owner with mob connections is that patriotic that he wants to kill Oswald? And then sacrifice his own life. You've got what was going on was, we talked about this last week with, mind control and men that stare at goats and all the crap that's happening. And yeah, they're still doing it. Still doing it. You find the right susceptible people. I mean, what happened to the kid who tried to shoot Trump?
Yeah,
that's it. It's over. We hear nothing more about this kid. His iPhone scrubbed.
What about the one that? What about the one that shot the or killed the insurance CEO? We haven't heard anything else.
Right. Clinton, is that you? I hear noise in the background.
I don't know. Shouldn't be.
Yeah. No. Hold on. Nope. We're good. Okay. Josh, you good?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I mean, we don't know what's going on with that. I understand it's an ongoing trial, so maybe it'll come out. But, what the hell was that about?
Yeah.
I said, you've got, we can, the technology's there to weaponize people. And it has been, we talked about last week, if you guys were listening then, it was, men at stare at goat shit. That program is still going on. They still have remote viewing. They still have, what they're doing now. I can only imagine. We're looking at 1963, now, 50 years later, 60 years later, you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. This makes a really good point, which we really didn't discuss. We've talked about before on different shows and stuff, but, we didn't discuss it when we were talking about this last week, but, it makes a really great point that, we're talking about individual, psychology that's turning people into weapons, but that's not even discussing the general tactics used to polarize and extremize a group of people, right?
I
mean, you talk about the communist playbook, right? The socialist revolution playbook, and that's the job, right? The job is to polarize and extremize entire populations to
kids,
then turn on their own government.
Kids,
right?
Look up Yuri Bezmenov interview from the 80s. Also, I'm giving everybody homework. Yuri Bezmenov, 80s. You will see exactly what is happening now. A 30-year game plan to infiltrate ideologies from the school level. Get them in college. Weaponize the professors, weaponize the students, and then you don't believe in democracy. You don't trust the system. You don't trust,
which is funny because you want a bigger,
speech.
more hefty system, but you don't trust the current system, right? It's so backwards.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but yeah, and in my studies in irregular warfare, right? For those that don't know, I dabbled in it a little bit. What he says, Damian saying, watch this video, what he says, if you watch it and you're like, oh, I don't know if that's real or not. I can tell you, from an academic standpoint, actually, reading papers and stuff on this stuff, that's 100% accurate. What he says is 100% accurate.
Yeah.
And it's actually been going since the creation of communism in 1916 or whatever it was, 1917. It's been going here in America, and we're well into 100 years of systematic indoctrination.
Right.
Yep.
We're a young country compared to these like China and Russia.
Very.
Yeah.
So I mean, they've got a different like worldview and timeline than we do. We're very much like 4 8 years. Like that's kind of like
China plays the generationals, right? So for people that don't understand Chinese history, I've also done a lot of studies into Chinese politics and military history, and like they played the generational game, right? They talk about dynasties being hundreds of years old. That's the game they play, right? They don't, to them, 30 years is nothing. 100 years is nothing, right?
Yeah.
And their one goal, right? People don't realize China's one goal is one rule under heaven, right? So China rules everything under heaven, and heaven being the sky, right? And so that's China's goal, right? And they don't necessarily like violence. In if anybody reads Sun Tzu or any of the other Chinese military classics, right?
Yep.
Violence is the last option, right? Everything else comes before violence,
right?
If you can win a fight without ever picking up a weapon, like that's the epitome of martial prowess.
And that's what they're doing. They're working from an economic angle. They're controlling trade routes. You're looking at, that's why the Panama Canal is crucial, right? And that's where, we're talking to my buddy whose wife is Filipino. There's a small group of islands off the Philippines that they basically started pouring concrete, and they built islands out there.
Yeah.
They built islands.
Yeah, they built islands.
And now,
because
but the
if the
U.S. comes through, they fuck with them.
Because if they can control the East China Sea, then they control 90% of the world's shipping, right?
Yeah.
And the only reason that they don't control it is because of the American Navy.
Yeah. Yep. We're the only ones that are allowed to patrol there that they don't mess with. And that's what,
we keep it open.
I don't understand why we've never adopted that philosophy, which is bizarre to me. It's like, okay, so we want to go. I think we're in it for the quick buck, where we can make money selling bombs and doing all that shit and blowing shit up, and eventually maybe we go in and rebuild it, whatever. Instead of just, hey, we're gonna put a blue jean. We're gonna make jeans here. We're gonna set this factory. We're gonna train you. We're gonna educate you. Now we're gonna set up a school. Now we're gonna throw in a McDonald's.
So America does play. America does play some long games, and I won't get into details about that, but we do play some long games, multi-generational, 100, 200, 1,000 years out. We've got plans, but what you don't see that right now. And then the problem with those long games is that, if you believe in any of the quote unquote conspiracies that are now proving to be true, we've had a shadow government that doesn't play for America's interest, right? They want a one world government. And so they don't care about America's, 200-year game, 500-year game, 1,000-year game. They want the one world government. And so they've actually been systematically destroying America, because America, if allowed to play its game, would be the dominant force in the world for a long, long, long time. And they don't want that.
Right. You're looking at, like, for example, the budget. It hasn't been audited, really. The Pentagon hasn't gone over
since what, Reagan, when he balanced the budget.
Right. And you're like, and I think Clinton actually did balance the budget too. I think but he also cut 300,000 federal jobs, by the way.
Yeah.
No one had a problem with that, right? That was like, okay. So, you still, you have all this, our budget is, God knows how many trillion, I don't know. But, how much is that really accounted for? When you're looking at it, there's like trillions and trillions where's that going? And you're saying shadow government. These are people who've been there forever. And they don't, there's no oversight committee, and if, whatever oversight committee there is, shit's redacted, and they're like, they just tell them what they want to tell them and go about their goddamn business. And there's so much money to be made, because if all of a sudden, you're a congressman or a senator, and you're going from, you're making, a couple $100,000 a year, and you retire with like 10 million.
10 million, yeah.
Where did that come from? Nobody's like, oh, that's okay. Why don't we, dude, I'm all for like even paying them more. I mean, there should be term limits, period, on all this shit. So, you don't have, access special interest groups, and you don't have certain, congressmen constantly, holding like Ways and Means and some of these other, large, the more.
Yeah, the committee should definitely rotate. The committee should rotate members at a minimum on a regular basis, which they don't. Right. It's like you get into the committee and you stay there. Like the people on the intelligence committee should not be the same people, every single year for like 2 decades.
Right. Because guess what happens, people? It's the same shit that happens with work. Like you show up every day. It's like, hey, Josh, hey, Clayton, how you doing? How the kids? How's the family? You're like connecting on a human level over a certain over a certain period of time. Mm-hmm. So you're like, these people are your friends. And now you're going to turn around and just fuck them? Or it's just like, hey, Clayton, guess what? We got this thing going on down in Nicaragua. If you do that, your kid wants to go to where? Okay, I could probably make that happen. Mm-hmm. They're going to get into Brown, no problem. Stupid shit like that. I'm just throwing stuff out there, but there's a quid pro quo. Or you want a job, sitting on the board of directors of the National Energy Company, no problem.
Yep.
Done. Get your son down there. He can smoke all the crack he wants on it. Yep. And that's where, and that's what happens, and that's what you don't see. We always say, like, of all the foreign, all the money that goes out, say over half of it's coming back in some way, shape, or another. Mm-hmm. Right? When we're giving 50 billion whatever to Ukraine, that's in the form of weapons, cash, whatever, shit that like, oh, they're supplying, American jobs here. I go, yeah, but we could be doing other shit too. If we were setting up manufacturing in other countries, if we're setting up infrastructure in schools, right? To, like building, like, then it's like, okay, now we're winning hearts and minds just by like, dude, everybody's got a higher standard of living now. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's like, yeah, we don't want to, and then who's to say, like, we walk around, it's like, why do we have to impose our values on every other goddamn country?
That is a problem that we keep repeating a mistake. Some people don't want our values.
Who the hell are we? Right.
Right. They want their own traditions and stuff to last. They don't want to be Americans. No. And we try to make them Americans.
If you want to be American, come to America. If you don't want to be American, don't come to America.
Right.
Right. Or move to a similar place, whatever. I just, you're like, I can't, I can't, fathom while we're sitting there, somebody who's like got Sharia law, and we're like, no, fuck that. Yeah. You need to, I'm like, dude, they're not ready for that.
Right.
You don't want it. You want to show them the good life? I go, dude, help them increase their their standard of living.
Yep.
Right. Help them, give them, whatever, education, healthcare, clean water, power, stability.
Yeah.
If the shit's not getting blown up, you're like, all right. I mean, we just got to keep sticking our hands.
Yeah, it goes back to first world problems, second world problems, and third world problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
First world problems are not third world problems. But when we go and we're like talking about first world problems in a third world country, they're like, hey, that's great. If I show up, you're going to feed me. I don't care what you say.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I
giving somebody the option to, follow some of our values or adopt them or some of our customs or ways of life or whatever is one thing. Forcing it down their throat, whether they want it or not, is a totally different ball game.
Yeah, you show through example, right? And if they decide that the example that, if they decide that they want what you have, then they're going to be like, hey, how do I get that, right? Well, I get that by following this path, not this one, right?
Right. But
and it's also
choose.
And it's also their version of that, right?
Right.
So it's their culture. We're like, oh wow, okay, we're awful towards women and gays and all that. And you're like, all right, eventually they're gonna, once they're comfortable enough, they're not gonna give a shit about that stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's just how it is. I mean, you care about you care about less and less stuff when you're not when people are dying.
Yeah.
They'll starving. I'm like, you'll blame anybody.
Mm-hmm.
for that reason. So, once ever, if you got a stable way of life, and it's not through the end of a gun, it never is. I mean, look, we were told that if Vietnam fell, communism would take over the world, and what happened? Nothing. Other than like millions of people dying, literally. You're welcome.
I'm all for freedom, capitalism, liberty and all that stuff, right? I'm all for it. And if a country is like, help us, if Vietnam was like, hey, help us, like we don't want to be communist, and we went and we helped them, did our best, that's one thing. But like Vietnam was the chosen location for Russia and America to actually duke it out, right? And Russia/China and America to duke it out. And so it's like the country really was just kind of like, whoa, what just happened to us?
Right, exactly. We just exactly. We just hosted World War III.
Yeah, essentially.
Wrong time, wrong place.
And same shit with Korea. You're like, and here we go.
So for Korea, that makes sense, though, right? So we went to Korea because,
South Korea,
quote unquote, South Korea did not want to be communist, right? And they were like, please come help us. And so we went and we helped them, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different story than, what's occurred in other places of the world,
Right, correct.
And the South Koreans are incredibly grateful for the fact that we did that.
Yes.
Absolutely. Like the youngest generation is a little bit like, why are you guys still here? But you talk to anybody who's old enough to at least have grown up as a child in that time frame, and they see an American soldier and they're like, oh my gosh, I love you so much.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So yeah, man, look at that. We made it to two things. You want to hit the last? Let's hit the last one that you brought up, Josh. All right.
For the one I brought up, I don't even remember what it was.
All right. Oh, you'll remember quickly. So 3 teens allegedly tried killing their mother because she turned off the Wi-Fi. 3 teenage girls in Houston, what's going on down there, man, have been arrested for allegedly coordinating a plan to kill their mother because she turned off the Wi-Fi. Said the incident occurred overnight in a southwest Houston neighborhood. Deputies responded to an area, found a woman who had been assaulted by her 3 daughters, 14, 15, and 16. I mean, that could happen. The girls are accused of grabbing kitchen knives, chasing their mother throughout the house and into the street, and then trying to stab her. The mother was also struck by a brick during an incident. According to Gonzalez, the girl's grandmother was knocked over while attempting to protect their mother. The mother and grandmother are not seriously injured. The teenage girls were arrested and charged with aggravated assault and with a deadly weapon, the sheriff said. He added that all 3 have been booked in the Harris County Juvenile Detention Center. Holy shit.
So I actually really like this topic because obviously for a lot of reasons. One, the fact that people would think Wi-Fi is worth life, right? That's insane.
Yeah.
But the point that the point that I wanted to make on this particular topic was that how often does violence come from within your own family?
Yeah, most of the time.
We always talk about the threat by some random person that's going to mug you on the street for your wallet, but 90% of the time the violence comes from somebody right?
Yeah, and as we talk about this, especially there's domestic violence, especially violence against women, sexual assault, and even again, children being sexual assaulted. It's usually somebody you have to have access, and they need time. There's a comfort level there, and most of the times, like we talk about, talk about this in Family Safe. It's like we always think stranger danger, but the reality is it's going to be somebody who has access to you,
had contact with somebody they kind of know to some degree.
Yep. And they're used to going under the radar because they know what the hell they are, but this is just, how many times, parents and kids, this happens. This is obviously extreme, but, these kids are like, hey, it's us versus her. And look, there's a lot of, we all got kids and grandkids. there's a lot leading up to this. You know, I would like to believe, you know, that this wasn't, I mean, for a parent that hasn't taken away a device, you know, at some point you're either very lucky or really you're not doing your job. Because, you know, the first thing you learn about parenting is find out what your child loves and leverage it against them to get the behavior you want. Period. You know, I mean, it used to be like, I mean, my dad was like, okay, here comes the belt. My mom was like, here comes the spoon. And, you know, it worked to a point, but then really, you know, it's like, okay, you know, you like your iPad? Okay, good. That's going to my room until you get your shit together. Period. You know, now I was fortunate enough my kids never like attacked me with a knife or a brick. I'm sure they wanted to. You know, at some point. I mean, if they didn't, I would be, you know, they thought about it. Or, oh my God, my daughter, when she was in trouble or angry at us, she used to write notes and then throw them down the stairs. So, Angela,
what a girl thing to do.
Yeah, I know. Angela and I would be sitting in the living room, and also we just hear like, you know, just the paper falling, and I'm like, "All right, you're gonna get her. I'm gonna get it." You know? It's like, yeah.
I got.
But you know, I actually.
Right.
I actually really like that though, because at least she wasn't afraid to express herself, even though it's written form, right? And a lot of times in written form, like, you know, there's confidence because you're not doing it person to person. You can express yourself. You know, you have time to be able to think about what you're actually going to say. You know, I like that. Okay, you know, I applaud her.
Yeah, man, thank you. I mean, look, we shouldn't get in trouble for it. I think Angela's kept the notes, of course. You know, they're someplace. I think we're just looking at them. But yeah, I'm like, and that's good. I mean, again, I'm sure maybe in a different world it was a brick, but you know, I said like this shit. I'm like, you know, this is like, yeah. I'm like, you know, I'm shocked, but I'm not. You know,
it is shocking. It is shocking and appalling. Yep. But again, it highlights the point that I wanted to make that, you know, like violence oftentimes comes from people, you know, right? Like I remember there was a time when I was, you know, just out of high school, I think, and my uncle, he's only a few years older than me, and he has like, you know, chronic psychological like diagnosable issues. And one day he got upset and he decided he wanted to try to attack me. And this is like after I had started close combat video training. We'll throw that plug out there.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you know, he tried to get at me, and I just kind of like pushed him off. I just like looked at him, and I was like, you know, I've been training for like a while now. This is not something you want to do. And he just kind of looked at me, and he was like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he wasn't crazy
No, he had like his outburst moment, and I just kind of was like, huh. And then he like stepped back and was like, wait a minute. And I was like, this is not a place you want to go.
You know, it's funny you say that because there's people that I've dealt with in my life. Like, oh, when he gets drunk, he gets, you know, blah, blah, blah. I go, yeah, but here's the thing. If you like choke a guy out once, you know, and then he tends to all of a sudden look at you when he's in that stage. And he like, oh, okay. And he just knows to not fuck with you.
Yeah. I mean, people talk about being like, you know, like, oh, I didn't know what I was doing, blah, 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 blah. Like, look, no matter how how much your inhibitions are released, you're still not completely retarded.
Right.
At least your animal instincts to a degree are going to be like, oh yeah, that's the thing I don't want to mess with.
Yeah.
So, dude. So, Chris Evans was just on the Rogan podcast. If you would, you should listen to it. It's really good. But one of the things he talked about, there's a Finnish soldier, and they were escaping the Russians, right? And they were on skis, and he wound up. They had I forget what they called the euphemism for it, but it was basically methamphetamine, and he wound up like absorbing 30 doses. Oh, dude! Like he went for like 2 weeks. He thought he was attacked by a badger, which was a log. He hallucinated. He thought he was like and well, like the guys in his unit, like they took his knife away, they took his ammo away because they didn't want to kill anybody. And he's like, "Fuck you, I'm out of here." I mean, you got to hear the story. I can't do it justice, but the dude wound up surviving. It was like something for like, I want to say 3 weeks on like water that he made from snow. He killed a bird and ate it raw. And methamphetamine, when they finally got to him, he was like 98 pounds and like, pure fucking go. Like he skied through a Russian patrol unit and they tried to catch him, but no one was catching that motherfucker. It's fucking gone. So when you can, I go listen to that stuff. I mean, it's a great podcast because it talks about a lot of mindset and stuff, but that story just popped into my head about, people losing their minds and truly losing their minds.
I'm sure you guys both remember like 2010, 2012 time frame when people were like doing bath salts, having psychotic episodes and like eating people's faces and stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know you both remember that.
Yeah. So there's that. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And then Crocodile was right after it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. On that note, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Josh, of course, Clayton, awesome to have you. Again, everybody, hit the links below, all that stuff. Until next time, train honestly.